I've heard quite a few people say that the manga is the same story as the comics with minimal changes, and I couldn't disagree more. There are changes here to character behavior, world lore, and abilities that give us its own universe entirely. Let's explore the Witch Mangaverse. This manga takes the first 3 comic issues of Witch and stretches it into 3 manga volumes. Again, because it's really its own universe. Like most discontinuations of Witch, there is little to no information on why it was discontinued. In my opinion, it's because the major beats of plot are stretched out, giving the story a slow build-up and losing some intrigue from the original. As you'll see, there are some obvious aesthetic changes that we won't dwell on too much, but being in black and white really does the Witchverse a disservice. Kandrakar residents appear less like a council of Stitch's cousins and are just generally more anime-like. The Oracle has a forehead gem that sometimes looks like a moon. Kandrakar also looks much bigger. Will's initial dream sequences show her in the heart, surrounded by a bunch of roses. This time, we don't see the heart shatter, but she is suddenly in a dark void. She can hear her name being called, but it's not the Oracle or Susan like in the original. She gathers enough awareness and is actually speaking aloud. This is the first case of something being drawn out. The original was 1 page, and this is a few. The elements seem to attack her and runs around saying that she sees no way out and collapses to the ground. Originally, she just seemed to be alone and exhausted, and yes, she did have the wind and water rush at her, but not dodge fire and earth like manga will. During this, I'll also show you original art versus the manga adaptation of iconic moments, like this. Now, here is a cultural thing. Will is arriving alone to Heatherfield by bus rather than ride in with Susan. So this I see as an anime trope. I've seen a lot of games in anime have like the main character bus into town. But this is common for a lot of kids in other countries because it is for the most part safe to take public transit alone in really anywhere besides the United States, to be honest. Will's also looking like a Pokemon trainer, and I'm really not sure why she's traveling separately. She arrives at the apartment building, still the same architecture. Her mother isn't there, and she's startled by a mover. The mover gets a signature, asks what school she goes to, and leaves. This is V.I.T.C.H. Cedric's also here too, but he's in the van. And the moving van tries to say Will's name as she walks past it. And the company name on their van is Koala Express. And Will's got a frog umbrella. Susan comes home, and that's the end of the night. Will is still late the next morning. We meet Tirani, and we learn that she's in the 7th grade, while Will is in 8th grade. At least in this version. The school is more obviously decorated for Halloween. When the girls go to shake hands, there's a spark and the candles nearby light up. After this, we get to see Will arrive to class and meet Cornelia and Elion. As Elion talks to Will, Cornelia has a vision of V.I.T.C.H.'s eyes. He's outside of the school using magic to view them as he touches the school's arch. His magical searching also seems to jolt Haylin awake from her nap. And now we get to see Tirani arrive to class, and this happens essentially the same way. And here's a comparison image of Cornelia musing about her own abilities. There is a small Ermelia moment where Irma is talking to Cornelia and Haylin, wondering if Will is nice. The whole time Cornelia is blushing and huffing while looking at and interacting with Irma. Meanwhile, Dean notices the moving van outside of the school and demands to know why a moving van has been parked outside of the school all morning. Then the girls challenge Elion to ask out a boy as punishment for a low grade. In this version, they suggest she ask while jumping on one leg. Here's Uriah and the group. I can't tell what this physical motion is, but Nigel helps Tirani up. In the original, he barely says anything. Nothing, actually. Now, Will yells at them to go away, and Nigel tries to get Uriah to leave before Cornelia steps in. Will is also less pensive about going to the party and just caves into the pressure after being asked once. As for Uriah's hijinks, we see he took flares from his dad's boat. This is stretched out into Uriah detailing a heist of sorts, telling us he'll put them inside the pumpkin, whereas this was a mystery before, leaving us in suspense. Haylin talks to Irma about her costume, and Yanlin now proposes a tea ceremony for Haylin's friends. Turns out Dean called the moving van into the cops, and Tom takes the call. Over at Irma's house, she still has her mystical bath, but is making whimsical shapes rather than just swirls. She even designs an intricate dress in the water.
I made this one with my tears!
The mangaverse leaves out her interacting with her father, and they don't put a mini storm cloud over her head either. However, where Irma originally changed the color of her clothes, this Irma gets her dress that she designed in the tub to appear as a real dress. The scene with Tarani and Will chatting about the party and being at her house is removed. Instead, we see her being followed by Vathic as she walks home, happening to pass by the bookshop as she pushes her bike slowly. Cedric tells Vathic he's put a spell on the window, and yes, it's the iconic window scene. I prefer the original for many reasons, but mainly because she was speeding by and halted at the sight. It's also now implying that Cedric gave her this vision when I originally believed it was magical destiny, like this coincidence of her seeing herself in this shop occurred, and that Kandrakar was warning her that this place was special. Will is also seen to have more magic detection than originally. She feels like someone
wants to sell me something!
I told you he was on to us!
This leads to an interaction with Vathic. He's hiding in an alleyway and tries to grab her. Will bolts for her life. While panicking, she runs into Tom, who tells her this part of town isn't safe, and that there's been strange happenings lately, and he takes her home to Susan. She doesn't at all mention being attacked, and apparently missing Will is what drives Cedric and Vathic to go to the party. Here's side-by-side comparison of the Cornelia home scene. And back in Kandrakar, the Oracle tells the Council that the rulers of Metamor have discovered the girls, and also Lube was here protesting. The Oracle tells her Guardians' hearts know they'll be Guardians from birth, and their hearts will always be young. The Halloween outfits are the same except Uriah, who is now a goat-based devil, and Nigel is Jack Skellington rather than Freddy Krueger. Here's the mirror scene. And here are some general costumes. Here's a Danganronpa reference, and maybe others. There's actually a reference to Disney's Robin Hood. At least I think so. Will spots Cedric before he really makes himself known. The girls lose Will at one point, and Elion volunteers to go find her. She witnesses Will bump into Matt. Apparently, Will thought she was grabbing onto Tarani, and that's kind of an insult to Tarani. This Will's also got the stereotypical anime girl klutz disorder and nearly falls over, so Matt has to pull her close. This is when Will notices Cedric is gone from where he's been lurking. And the chapter ends with Cedric bowing to Elion outside. At the start of the next chapter, we see Cedric dramatically swipe some makeup on and walk away from Elion. She seems entranced as Martin calls her in for a photo. Tarani thinks Elion is acting strange. Will doesn't seem to, though. Cornelia asks her if she's sick because she's pale, and she says she isn't. Here's the photo, and the Oracle looks at it through a cloud instead of a Polaroid. Now, Cedric appears with Vathic. Vathic is in a tough biker look, and Cedric is, I guess, a monk. Oddly, their plan is to cut the power, and apparently Will glow for a bit. I guess the leader of the Guardians is radioactive. Vathic swears on the Black Roses of Meridian that he'll not fail. And the Black Roses are sworn on numerous times throughout this. As Knickerbocker approaches the Great Pumpkin with her torch, Uriah and the group are shocked, so I guess they didn't intend for the pumpkin to be lit. A spotlight suddenly lights on Will, so I guess that's what Cedric meant. I guess weird translation. Insanity ensues. Dean tells everyone to leave calmly, only he knows there's a large snake on the circuit breaker. And what the flank steak is going on here? Cedric seems to be embracing Elion while playing a flute, and Matt notices a metal cage about to fall on Will and tackles her down. Vathic's markings looks like he's crying. Dean directs seniors to help younger students, so I guess this school goes from middle school to high school. Knickerbocker's torch goes flying, and Cornelia redirects it magically to fall on the pumpkin. This poor person in a bunny costume is right next to the explosion. Cedric still has Elion. Irma tells Knickerbocker to run. Tarani still gets her rocket-stopping moment, but it's much less aesthetic and a little lame looking here. Elion and Cedric are up on the roof. She's entranced. The rocket almost hits him, and he redirects the rocket down to Will, who's somehow at the pumpkin now. Originally, this looked like an unfortunate redirect from Tarani. Irma asks Martin to kick some pipes, saying that it's time to show everyone that he's a man, and in turn, he's kind of freaking out at how close her face is. She uses this as a cover, having the water rain down on the fire, which steals this epic moment from Tarani. But they still have Will hug Tarani like she's the one who saved her, though. Here's the difference in Haylin and Irma's dream sequence. Elian leaves the conversation early to head to Cedric's, but doesn't tell them where she's going. This version implies that the moving company and the bookshop were magical illusions, or at least that they took someone's place temporarily rather than own the bookshop. This is because Cedric says until sunset, V.I.T.C.H will stay disguised as a mover and he'll be disguised as the bookshop owner. At the tea ceremony, Yanlin welcomes them and says she's especially happy Will is there safely. She gives the story of the veil. This is the same story we know, and here's how the original universe is represented. The mangas has a lot more gears in it, and the manga shortens this segment and doesn't have Yanlin going to each girl with their power. It just skips to Will getting the heart, which apparently goes in a specific hand, the right. Yanlin rejects the left. We also see it sink into her skin. Elian runs up and asks them to go on her date with Cedric later. Will is surprised that she's going on this date, and Halen calls her slow. Elian pretty much shoves them into the gym, and Will wonders if this enthusiasm is what it's like to be in love. Okay. While looking for the gym light, Halen shares that there was a snake at the Halloween party. V.I.T.C.H grabs them, and Irma calls him a pervert. Cedric gives a speech from the shadows that if the Guardians are gone, they could easily conquer worlds and send Meridian's worst criminals here. So, Australia's original purpose. Here's the transformation sequence. Will indicates her body is doing all of this automatically. The manga leaves out this iconic moment. We get this instead. When Halen saves Irma from falling into the portal, she bumps into Cedric rather than V.I.T.C.H. His face pattern is different, and his eyes are mostly black. In a very anime manner, Halen eeks, and Cedric seems to have an embarrassment tear. Also, creepy creatures are trying to climb through the portal. Originally, V.I.T.C.H had laser eyes that set the gem on fire, but this time he snaps, and he might also have de-transformed them. In the next chapter, Will is wondering if Elian has been missing because she didn't like that Will moved there. And this is another trope that annoys me, where the character is so self-deprecating that they think everything is related to them, which is actually annoyingly egotistical in my opinion. And then later at school, Will thinks that everyone thinks that it's her fault the group is split. I guess that last thing is a very teenager thing to think, but the first one is such a bizarre conclusion. When the girls learn about Andrew Hornby missing, Irma isn't at school, so Will goes to find her. For some reason, this causes Tarani to say that Will gives her all for the sake of others. I mean, where is this evidence? None of them follow her, and Cornelia says Will can just meet up with them later. Martin shows Will a photo of an older-looking girl that looks like Irma. This was her guardian form. Will drags Irma away and yells at her, but we don't see the conversation. Everyone meets at Halen's, where she says her grandmother isn't feeling well. Now is when she tells each girl their element. And Yanlin's son walks in to tell her it's time for her medicine. I mean, did he overhear and think she was crazy? That night, Will has a nightmare where she's yelling at the others while nude that she can't handle this, and then freaks out when they walk away. During this, she sleepwalked to her window and is about to jump out of it. It seems that Cedric caused this. After some deep breathing, Will resolves that she'll do her best to accept everything. The manga forgoes the hangout at Will's during the blackout. Dormouse happens and is so cute but keeps changing his looks. Here he looks like a red panda. In the original, Yanlin had passed away by the time we met Dormouse. Here's Matt looking suave. Also, I realized nobody has dark hair. Well, not so dark, but Matt should at least be shaded. Also, Matt draws a little raccoon on his note for Will. Now, after school and seemingly days later, Will finally has a chat with Irma about what happened with her transformation. Irma is weirded out that she's not angry like when she first found out. And also, they don't give you the whole story. It literally just shows a frog and, quote, actually, it was, and then... and that's it. Then Will laughs at her and decides that they should probably start looking for Elian. Originally, Will only feels that they'll see Elian again, while manga Will says Elian is waiting for them and that she feels Elian is safe and sound. Tarani has a moment where she feels like something is changing about herself and feels anxious. Halen says that the wind is screaming and feels uneasy. They decide to enter Elian's house. This makes Tarani freak out and feel vulnerable. Cornelia is just annoyed and tells them to just stay outside and would gladly root them to the ground if they wanted. Irma calls Cornelia mean, and Tarani apologizes, which confuses Will and me as well. I don't know if it was the translation I have or just the way it's written out a lot, but a lot of it took me some time to understand. Tarani is drawn to this horse creature statue. Cornelia shares that its name is Nagar, a fire horse that if you tame it, you become king. This is not real-world lore. Nagar means city in Hindi, though. This must be New Meridian lore. Cornelia says Elion had a book about it. They want to go in the basement and have to remind Tarani that she can use fire, and I'll just remind you that she already did this before in the original because she had made little fireballs at Will's house. However, it goes horribly wrong and she nearly burns the house down, so Irma douses everything, and they end up getting stuck drying and cleaning everything for who knows how long. Will senses something, and we see that someone is watching. After they leave, Elion comes out of the basement. Cedric tells her if they knew who she really was, they would run away, that this is a game to them. And Elion tells him to wait, that she trusts them. What is even the plot here? Then the Nagar appears behind her. Also, apparently it's her goal to have them enter the basement, but Cedric reminds her if they don't do that, that Phobos said he can destroy them. So Phobos being evil is not a secret to her here. Finally, Yanlin gives Haylin the map of the 12 portals, and the next morning it's raining at school where Haylin says that the wind is crying now. On this day, Irma decides to share what happened to Andrew, and Will is just sipping her tea, trying to look all nonchalant, like she doesn't know what happened. This goes down the same, and now we get the full story that Will heard before. We also see Cedric talking to a murmurer plant, except he calls it Mormor. Phobos begins to speak through the Mormor, and the first thing Phobos says is, quote, "Stop insulting my plant, these sun rays hurt it." And it's clear now that Elion is preventing Cedric from attacking, and I'm not sure why, but Cedric says that she's becoming angry. At home, Will is staring into the heart of Kandrakar when Susan just walks up and is just like, "Why are you staring at your hands?" So she can't see the heart, even after Will tries to deliberately show her. Again, it's weird how it just kind of sinks into her hand. The inside cover of the next volume kind of implies that Will dreamed of being a princess, either older or in her guardian form, but that's all we see is just this one piece of artwork like that. That morning, Irma sees Andrew's missing poster in the paper and that the police found Elion's family car. That day is when the girls have a talk where Cornelia gets startled by a root, something that also happened sooner in the comic. Originally a flashback as they stood outside Elion's house. As Cornelia shivers in fear from her own power, Haylin hears a voice saying, "I believe in all of you." Will gets dizzy, and that's when Elion decides to play hide and seek. Now we're back at Elion's house. They see the footprints and they feel that the room got bigger. As they enter the basement, they ask Tarani to light the way, and the fire takes the shape of her symbol. Though this time, it's Irma to open the secret door. Supposedly, she detects it by sensing the humidity on the other side. It's also much larger than originally. Vathek and Elion confront the girls, and he is very polite and calls Haylin Miss. He also is very huge for some reason. As everyone is separated and trapped, Will becomes determined, her symbol appearing on her forehead. As the others transform, Vathek demands Haylin tell him how many guardians there are, like it's not common knowledge or consistent. He seems to take pity on her and gently places her down, not believing a small girl can be his enemy. Elion says that she can betray a friend one day and smile the next. Not sure what that's about. Originally, Tarani throws a fireball at this point, and she still does, but gets a whole page. They get Phobos' book, and they find Andrew. And here's Haylin with a bun. Next chapter, we see Dormouse, who also seems to be Panda Mouse. And we don't get Will drawing her face on in the morning, which always reminds me of this toy, by the way.
She's the doll you create. Stamps and markers make her face change her look with lips and eyes. What draw them on, you decide.
Here is where most differences begin. We get this whole new scene of Nigel working at his family grocery store. Will and Tarani stop here on the way to training. Will bumps into a little girl, and Nigel seems to stare and blush at Will. And it's giving...
By the way, my name's Caleb.
Uriah shows up to cause trouble and sticks gum into Will's hair. Nigel steps in and discreetly hands Tarani some gum icing spray and walks out on his shift, getting him in trouble for sure. It's also kind of implied that his father thinks of him as a loser and calls him that in front of everyone, so I'm sure Nigel got beat up by his father after returning that night. Also, apparently Uriah frequently steals from the store and put gum in Will's hair because Nigel wasn't coming out to play. Training is essentially the same, except a random Tarani insult was thrown in which Irma reveals that Cornelia had called Tarani slow and indecisive, though she apparently clarifies, saying that she meant she daydreams too much. Why did they even put this in? We get some of Luba brooding about the Guardians, which had not happened in Arc 1 much. I mean, not a lot at least. Tarani wonders to Will why Nigel gave her the ice spray, and Will says he's like her, that every group, quote, needs a stopper like her, and Tarani swoons over this? But what the heck does that even mean? It sounds like another insult. Then later, Nigel asks Will if she's free after school, and it's not about Uriah, so Tarani thinks it's a date. Miss Rudolph asks Will to be tutored, and then we see Dean and Susan on a date. As Will speeds off in anger, we see her zoom past Cedric, just chilling in his shop. His little plant says that Phobos tells him he should, quote, go do an ambush. Cedric seems like he'd rather just read his book, to be honest, especially when the Mormor tries to tell him Will just passed by, and he's basically like, yeah. Will stops at the school and finds a dead body. Joking, it's just Matt napping. Will tries to sneak off without waking him, embarrassed that she's been crying, and runs straight into Nigel, panting because he's chasing after her. He notices Matt laying barefoot and gets sad and implies that Nigel thinks that they just hooked up in the courtyard. So he abruptly leaves, seemingly bothered, and says that he'll take care of Uriah, and Will blushes about him being a nice guy. Then she freaks out that Matt may have heard the hookup implication. He did, and she shoves his hat in his face like she's suffocating him. Irma and Halen spy on Rudolph. Halen just uses her air to fly up to an open window this time instead of Irma picking the lock. This essentially goes the same after that. Dormouse is now a raccoon, or a fox. My husband called it a tanuki, but yes, that's supposed to be Dormouse, which never looked like a dormouse. Will had asked for help with the Dormouse, but he says he can't help her tomorrow because he'll be with his girlfriend. And after the Rudolph debacle, Cedric is outside and thinks, darn, that just leaves one portal now. Yanlin is still kicking about, but barely. The girls open the seal of Phobos at Cornelia's, and I find the layout here not as impactful. But also look at the little book in there. Will zones out while Cornelia's scolding her choices and takes the time to truly marvel at the power of the heart, something original Will doesn't do enough in my opinion. She tells herself that she needs to calm down and they've got to get their act together for the greater good. When she snaps back, Cornelia is challenging her leadership, but Will says they never decided on a leader. She tries to rally them by saying that they were chosen to protect the city
of Townsville.
The city that they love. They also give a lot of world lore here. In the final manga chapter, Luba yells some more. Halen starts sleeping beside Yanlin's bedside, which I could totally see that in the original. Wish it was there. Peter and Tarani chat, and Tarani once again calls herself slow. Also, Teresa is dark-skinned here. Tarani goes to give Nigel back the ice spray, but also gives him a Swiss Army knife that she then pretends is from Will. The girls meet to have yummy snacks and discuss everything, saying there are 9 portals left. They talk about Halen acting sad, and they also can't visit Yanlin for questions in her poor condition. Cornelia poses that being so young is illogical, that Elion's probably the key to everything, and Tarani says that they are also united by friendship, and then Cornelia says, you say great things sometimes, and the manga implies this is an insult. Will agrees with Cornelia about the possible connection, but then again, the manga makes Tarani look like she thought Will insulted her. And Will wonders if Elion's family is good or evil. The heart shows Elion's house again, and they return. Cedric is again chilling when the Mormor tells him to go attack. He swears on the black roses he'll succeed. In Elion's basement, the portal appears behind Tarani instead of Cornelia, and here it's made more obvious that the Seal of Phobos can open portals by showing it again. Cedric is stopped on approach by Yanlin. Cedric notes the atmosphere, and this is all I could hear during this entire scene. Yanlin says that she's been a guardian for 1,000 years, and that it's nice to meet him. He says she's not really there, and Yanlin must have activated her chakra because steam starts rising. Cedric wonders if she's a fire user. This successfully seems to stop Cedric from approaching, but this was enough to kill Yanlin. She leaves him in whipping wind and fire. He speeds away in snake form. Entering Meridian goes about the same, except it's less visual, and then they're welcomed by Elion on the back of her majestic steed Nagar. Like, seriously, really majestic. And here's Phobos. He appears as a giant floating head to say that she should not be making an appearance in front of the lower class citizens. She seems sad and calls them her friends, and tells them they should stay there. Originally, this part read as more sinister on her end, especially with that face. But, of course, they refuse, and Phobos tells their slaves to charge. What was a few soldiers before are now an army. Cornelia has to open a much bigger pit than before, making them stand on a literal pillar afterwards. Haylin makes a hurricane, Irma makes waves to surf, and small Irmelia moment where Irma tells Cornelia that she looks good, drenched in water. Frost arrives, they hide, and create the astral drops. And Tirani is captured. They don't steal her mouth this time, but she still telepathically communicates. Elion disturbingly tells everybody that running away won't change anything, and that she's tried that. Elion, please blink if you're in trouble. Will tells everyone they're going home now, but not as aggressively or as powerful as originally. And then the last page of the last published manga, of which in Japan says, "We'll be right back." If I've got any Japanese viewers, how traumatizing was it for you to never see Tirani get saved? Okay, so this manga is the only case I know of where the importing country decided to take Witch and recraft itself almost entirely. Though here's an example of outfit changes in one country. It's simply not Witch. And what I'm about to say can vaguely apply to the reboot, to be honest, because my excitement goggles kind of fell off. In the case of this manga, it took the story of Witch while adding its own spin. The most glaring case is Nigel and Matt being an implied love triangle with Will, heck, a love square you could say. This made it feel like just any other shoujo manga for a good chunk of it. After all, magical girl stories aren't something new to a Japanese audience, while it was a sought-after novelty over here. Again, not being in color takes away some marvel and some iconic imagery. I was still curious to see where they were going to take the lore of Meridian, but that might be because I have the original to compare it to. Otherwise, it could appear just like any other anime. And I think it also kind of muddled the franchise for Japan. This isn't the only form of Witch Japan got. They also received a light novel, which is the chapter books, written by Elizabeth Leonard and the others after her. New artwork, separate from the original and separate from the manga, was made for these. I've been told that there were some minor changes there too, but I've never read the Japanese version, so I can't confirm that. Having that under the same brand as the manga is just very confusing.
What kind of fool do you take me for? He's Squidward, you're Squidward, I'm Squidward! Are there any other Squidwards I should know about? Meow. I'm out of here.
And it's only fitting now that we also go over some pictures from the chapter books. These can be found on witchbookarchive.wordpress.com. And let's see what we have here. Definitely a whole different look from the manga, which actually I like this style a lot more. It seems to, oh my gosh, look at Uriah here. Ick. But other than that, I like this style much better than the manga. But this is the bathtub scene. Kind of lame. And oh yeah, so here's Will seeing herself in the window. If I had to rank window scenes, this would be the bottom one. Because, I mean, just, it doesn't look quite majestic to me. But here you get to see that the Guardian outfits have some interesting accessories applied, like Will has this belt with a heart on it, and she's got, I think, a barrette here. Here's everybody. Irma's hair is looking a little too bright. Probably should be shaded a bit more. Everyone's costumes are vaguely the same. Cedric and Vathic. Okay, manga Vathic is much better than chapter book Vathic. Knickerbocker, where is our curvy queen? Yenlin passing the heart to Will. She is so tiny. And, I mean, the heart is also tiny. Oh, here's the gym scene, I think. Oh, Irma's got a belt too. No special belt for Haylin, though, it looks like. But she's got some side bangs out. I'm gonna assume that's Matt. He actually looks their age. Allion playing hide and seek again. And here's everybody else. We got Cornelia's got an interesting belt as well. And a choker necklace. Interesting. Ooh, Tarani's hair. No. At least, like, make it curly, not just a wavy updo. Oh, and Cornelia's in a headband? And I think Irma's got a headband, too. Okay, we got some hair accessories and some belts. Kandrakar. Talking Frid. This is kind of adorable. I can't tell what this is. Is this a TV screen? Are they watching a scary movie? I mean, is that Vathic? Because ick. Cornelia, I guess, has some bangs. The Oracle, looking like Aang over here. Haylin dropping the music box. One of my favorite scenes. Irma blasting some water. Not very dynamic. The air bubble, much tinier. Wait, was she giving a peace up? What? Why is she giving a peace up sign? This isn't a photo, Will. It looks like Tibor just looks like a kid in an old man costume. Oh, man. Cedric. He's in his snake form, but he's tiny and not so buff. Oh, the astral drop kiss scene. So they went kind of farther in the chapter books. They must have. I mean, this is much further. Dormouse is now a squirrel. Why can't we get Dormouse correct? Vathic, I guess he just got deer horns. All right. And just different. He's just different. He's got a tail. He's small. Reunited. Oh, Tarani has earrings. I didn't notice that. All right. Oh, God. Look at this cover with Tarani on it. Oh, my God. They did her so bad in both versions. Matt at the pet shop. Oh, is that Dormouse looking like a dormouse? Maybe. Or a cat. Irma. This sweater is so her. I mean, she hadn't worn something like that before. But it's just, it gives that 2000s punk vibe that Irma totally would go into. Is this how they portray them transforming? Like ribbons are coming around them? I mean, I guess that's standard magical girl. So bad. Vathic looks like a Pokemon, and Cedric. Oh God, Uriah. This is horrible. I mean, the covers and everything is cute with these books. Like the coloring, the shading, I love it. I missed this art flub originally where Will had Cornelia's hair. And this was which comic versus manga. Just so you know, these manga have been re-released with variant covers, and one of the artists is the very Julia Adragna from the reboot. And her cover looks marvelous. And the other cover gives me 80s anime vibes. So far, these only seem to be re-released in Italy through Panini, and maybe Amazon, I don't know. One last thing. The manga didn't have stripes on the tights. Thank you for joining me, and please comment and subscribe. Guardians Unite!